The Passionate Leader, because leadership without passion is just a title.
Meeting. We got a collapse in the garage. Get the squad back equipment in here. We got an I-beam gone to a firefighter.
Get that out, urgent, transmit a second along.
This is where titles end and leadership begins.
Ask yourself, when was the moment you realized your title didn't automatically make you a leader? Today's guest is a man who lived that lesson from just about every angle possible. Jim Dignan spent years serving as a fire chief, EMA coordinator, fire company president, business owner, mentor, trainer, and even mayor of his hometown. But what makes his story powerful is not some polished, perfect leader narrative. It's the honesty behind it. Jim openly admits he stepped into leadership roles before he fully understood the difference between authority and influence. That realization sparked a lifelong passion for leadership development and helping others avoid the mistakes he had to learn through experience. Whether he was coaching baseball, teaching judo for more than 2 decades, mentoring aspiring leaders, and leading inside both the firehouse and corporate America, one thing kept showing up over and over again. Leadership is not something you're born with. It's something you build, something you refine, and more importantly, something that you pass on. In a world where too many people talk just to be heard, Jim's advice cuts through that noise. Speak less, listen more, and ask better questions. This conversation dives into reflection, growth, mentorship, and the responsibility we all carry to prepare the next generation better than we were prepared ourselves. So pull up a chair. This is going to be one of those conversations that challenges how you show up, both as a leader and as a human being. Welcome to The Passionate Leader, Jim Dignan. How are you?
Great, and happy to be here with you. Thank you.
Awesome. It's always our honor and privilege to have people come on. It's nice to see different angles of leadership in the world. Yours is going to be really fun because you have both fire service and corporate America. And truthfully speaking, I have actually the mayor angle is really, really neat for me. And it may not be as glorious as I portray it to be, but I've always kind of thought, the approach would be neat to get somebody on the show who has kind of the political background. What is it like to sort of play that angle of having to balance feelings and, beliefs and stuff like that. And albeit it's likely going to, come to find, probably come to find out that it's the same as, being a chief in a firehouse. But is there anything from the intro that either we left out you want to add on or anything that may have, been missed?
No, I think you covered it. I think it was all pretty well there. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So one of the reasons we do the intro, the bio for people is, and I was telling Greg during his episode, excuse me, is a lot of us are super duper humble, and when I put out, tell me about yourself, it's partly a vetting process, but most of the times it's just so that we can have a really, really nice ask yourself intro to the show. And a lot of us are just like, oh, I was a fire guy for a few years, did some pretty cool things, and then you start scratching the surface and you realize, oh my gosh, this guy's served in Nam. This guy's done, he's done this, and he's saved a whole orphanage and nuns and, really cool stories, but they're just so humble. It's like, yeah, I did fireman stuff. It was kind of fun. So that's why there's the bio, and then there's what do you do in your free time, and all of that fun stuff, because there's just really, really, it's just so neat to see how the fire service is different, but all the same, if that makes sense. So it's crazy.
I think what I found was the fire service, while I was really young, 18, 19, and so on there, I think it had a real impact on my life, whether that was my personal life, my business life. But I also think that, a lot of the lessons that I've learned through my jobs, my career, my positions, I think they also helped with the leadership aspect when I was a fire chief.
Sure.
what I what I've done with this course that I've created, I call it Command Leadership Development, was I tried to take some of the gaps, identify the gaps that I felt as a
Mm,
young fire officer, who honestly felt that, I really wasn't prepared. And then what I learned through companies investing in my and tried to marry those two things together. Because leadership, it doesn't matter whether it's the firehouse or whether it's the office. The concepts are all the same.
hmm
And if you can apply them in one area, you can definitely apply them in other areas.
Sure.
So it's that real interest of, you know, hey, it kind of worked over here. It should work over there as well. And oh, hey, I just learned a neat trick, right? It
Sure.
works
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
both
Yep.
places. Yeah. So leadership development just became something that I immersed myself into, just kind of dove into it.
Mm,
I wasn't sure what it was that I was missing. I knew
hmm
there was something that wasn't there. I had instincts that led me, in mostly good ways.
Sure. Sure.
There were some other times where, I made problems a little worse before I made them better.
that I think everybody has for sure. Yep.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. I had some really good mentors along the way.
Mm,
Um, and then there were those people I learned from in a very different way, but all valuable lessons. I learned as much from the people that I considered to be bad leaders as I did from the people that I considered to be good leaders.
mm.
Different lessons, equally as valuable.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you hit on earlier, and it's something that I definitely it hit home for me because I feel I was in the same boat when I was a younger officer. I moved up relatively quickly in my fire service career from just being the backstep firefighter to now being a lieutenant, and I honestly wasn't prepared. Was there ever a moment? I mean, what did that moment look like for you at the time? Did you realize it in the moment, or was it sort of later on in your career? Like, man, I really wasn't ready for that position.
So for me, it was kind of interesting because here I am, this young guy
Mm.
that's sitting in the officer seat, and you give an order,
Mm.
and you watch everybody go to look at the real leader to say, "Is what he's saying all right?"
Yeah.
And when you see those heads turn and they look to somebody else, that's kind of the first indication that, okay, they really respect that guy.
Mm.
Do they not respect me, or do they not
Okay.
trust me? Or so when you see them look to somebody else to find out whether the order you've given is the right order or not, that was the first indication for me.
I could that is a very deep level of humility, I think, for somebody who how old were you when you first promoted up?
Well, I think it was 19.
So
Um,
a teen. You were barely a legal
yeah,
consenting
I think it
adult.
was 19, possibly 20. There was some turnover of leadership
Mhm.
that, you know, forced other people to go, well, it's time for me to go now too. And what we ended up with was a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds running a volunteer fire company.
Okay.
Some of whom didn't even have a checkbook at the time. So yeah, we learned our lessons the hard way. Um, but
Yeah, all right. Trial by fire sometimes is kind of the way to
yeah,
think of it, right?
yeah, trial by fire. We thought we knew more than we
Mm.
actually knew. We would get
Yeah.
ourselves into some trouble here and there, and it was around that time that I really started taking this deeper interest in learning more, because what I did understand was we were getting great training. We had a
Sure.
great training facility. We had people within our own department that were um, instructors for the State Fire Academy.
Hmm.
We were getting great training. We learned strategy and tactics, and we learned interior firefighting and rescue, and we learned how to talk over the radio, but we didn't learn how to communicate. We learned, we went through officer
Mm.
courses, but we didn't learn to be leaders. So we learned tactics, strategy. We learned building construction and all of these things. But this is where I found the gap: was nobody was really teaching you how to be a leader.
Mm.
I'm not really sure that in the early '90s and mid '90s this was as big of a topic as it is today. Leadership
Sure. Yeah.
versus authority. And when you're young like that, you get put into these positions. You often confuse your positional authority, your rank, your title, the authority that is granted to you by,
Mm.
the organization. You confuse that for influence. And when all you know is, okay, I wear a different colored helmet, I now get to tell people what to do and talk on the radio. Hey, if that's the goal, then hey, you're there. You have nothing left to learn then, right? Um, but if the goal is, I want to be a good officer, I want to be a
Mm.
good leader, then you dig in a little bit more. So I watched, I observed people.
Hmm.
One of the things that I talk about in my course was this just an incident that happened at our fire station. And it was a disagreement between the fire chief and the police chief.
Oh,
And I
okay.
remember standing back and watching this happen. Turned into an argument out on the out on the runway. Uh, Went on for several weeks into the fire station. Eventually, it made its way into a borough council meeting
Boy.
and found its way into the local newspaper after that. Now, the reason that I use this is not to ask who was right and who was wrong,
Sure.
but could this have been handled differently? And that gets to the root of some of the discussions we have in command leadership development is, can we handle problems differently than we do? Can we handle stress and pressure differently than what we've been, the way we've been
Mm.
handling it? And
Yeah.
these are the things that we're not being taught. They might say things like remain calm, but they didn't teach you how to remain calm.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we began, right?
Mm.
Is the emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
yeah, the ability to regulate yourself first,
Mm.
right? We get on an incident scene. If I want to be able to command that scene, well, I have to have command of myself first. That means, present has to be right. I can't be running around like a chicken with my head cut off and
Right.
screaming and yelling into my radio and looking like I don't know what I'm doing.
Mm.
So, what I teach is I call it the tactical pause.
Okay.
One breath, one question. Right. So, you take that breath to kind of slow down, stop things from happening, and ask yourself one question: what is the most important thing right now? So, that's the tactical pause that I've used. It's take a deep breath, settle down, slow yourself down.
Hmm.
Right? Slow yourself down. We're not slowing down the chaos around us. We're slowing down how we're processing, and we're saying, okay, what is the most important thing right now? And then we approach from there. When you have leaders, whether it's on a fire ground, whether it's EMS, whether it's as the mayor, could be in your profession. Um, there will be chaos. There will be stress. There will be pressure. You cannot stop that, right? It's
Yeah.
going to come. It's how we respond to that that really helps to determine what type of leader we're going to be, what kind
Mm.
of influence we have over people. So as we work through this, we take that tactical pause, we slow things down. Sometimes in these situations, leaders tend to fold in on themselves, separate themselves, and try to take everything on their own. I had great officers when I
Mm.
was the fire chief. I was I was surrounded by really good people. We had a guy that was a driver at the time. He's a retired assistant chief. He was a instructor with the State Fire Academy. Really good pumps guy.
Mm.
Um, could tear a pump apart and put it back together. And
Sure.
hey, he drove the fire engines. If I ran into any trouble out on a scene, he was there. I had in my tenure as chief, I had 3 different assistant chiefs. They were all good. I could lean on them. If we had a major incident, I knew that I had experience there. I knew that
Hmm.
I had people who were well respected. I knew that I had knowledge, experience. It made my life a little bit easier when I realized that one of the best things a leader can do is lean on his team, lean on that experience. So my assistant chief was a state instructor, right? Interior certified, pumps and all those things. If I needed water, I knew I could make that his problem while I dealt with other things,
Sure.
right? So delegate, right? Trust your team. Give them meaningful work, not just surface level busy work. Empower them to make decisions. Lean on them. Let them help you be the leader that you can become
Yeah.
by not trying to do everything yourself. So we take these things and we start to, we start to put them together. Tactical pause, right? One breath, one question, right? What's the most important thing now? I've got to get water. Hey, I know the guy that can get that, and handle it.
Hmm.
And all I have to do is say, get me water. Order's been given. He has it. He's got it. It's coming.
Yeah. Yep.
No problem. Then I had some real experience on the back, right? And so if I had younger, junior, less experienced people, I still had those experienced people that I could trust
Mm.
to lead these guys. So you become a bit of a conductor
Yeah.
while
That's
you're
a good
out
way to put
there,
it. Yep.
right? Now, the one thing that we have to learn in that, in that scenario, is the conductor, to do a good job, has to turn his back to the audience,
Mm.
right? So we can't be in the position for the wrong reasons. Because I like that I get to tell people what to do. Because I like being the chief. Because I like that I get a radio and get to put a radio in my car and a red light. Those are all the wrong reasons.
Mm.
If that's your driver, your motivator, you're going to have a hard time as a leader. It's going to be difficult for you.
Sure. Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh yeah. What do you What do you think sort of drove you to want to? I mean, obviously, in all aspects of your life, you're obviously really passionate about being, a leader or being in a leadership role. Have you found what that precipice was, or the catalyst that just really makes you want to be in a leadership role?
I'm not really sure. My dad was the mayor of town when I was young.
Hmm.
And I got to see a lot of that small town, but you got to see that. Uh, so I'm sure that had an effect.
Mm.
Uh, I had an uncle who was a school teacher and very well respected in the community, and so there was probably some of that there as well. So I started to see these influences when I was young, and maybe that's sort of what really got me passionate about this. But I also think that as I got a little bit older, it was some of those bad leaders that made me
Okay.
want to learn more
Sure,
too.
sure. Yeah.
Um, you know, you've got those people that, they think that their position, their authority is there simply so they can use it, right?
Mhm.
I'm gonna benefit me from that. I'm gonna use my authority, my position to benefit me and maybe a couple of my buddies. So this is where I have to be very clear about the difference between influence
Mm.
and manipulation. Right?
Okay.
So using your authority for your own benefit, that's manipulation. Using influence to better the organization, the person you're working with, you know, that's influence. Right. So you think about the root of influence and how do we gain that influence? The way I teach it is just simply three C's. And it is uh, competency, right? Can you do your job well? But not only can you do it well, can you train others to do it well? Character, right? Character means, that I can't have buddies in my role, right? As the fire company, separates itself into social subgroups,
Mm.
I can't belong to one. I have to be the person that bridges that gap between those. And application of standards must be equal, right? If I talk with you about upholding this standard, I better talk to the other people that have,
Mm.
missed the same thing, to have the conversations about upholding standards with them. So application of standards equally, do what you say you're going to do, be where you are supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. And then a connection is the third C, and that's a deep connection with the people that you're leading, deep connection with your team.
Mm.
Um, you've got to show interest. You know,
True. Yeah.
if you're the officer that walks past the junior member in the station and you don't stop and have a conversation and get to learn them, get to learn about them, their name, and what they like, why are
Mm.
they there, things like that, you're not going to have the connection you need. You have to treat everybody as important. Um, People want very basics, right? They want to be heard, they want to be seen, they want to be valued. Your job as the leader is to connect with that team
Mm.
and provide those things. So we've got to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, right? We're
Yeah, yeah.
composed. We have that presence while we're out there. We have to make sure that, hey, I'm not asking you to do something I'm unwilling to do.
Mm.
Um, we have to be able to lean on our team and say, your experience here is much more than mine. You're going to take the lead on that.
Mm.
Um, Connect with your people, get to know them. Don't belong to one clique or the other, right? Be the person that spans the gap between both, and you're going to see that a lot. You're going to see, you know, the generational gaps.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Generational gaps are big because we were learning all the new stuff, and the older guys, it's not the way you do it. It's this way. Yeah, we did it this way for 30 years. There's no reason to change it now. That kind of like, yeah, you guys also went in without air bottles. So
Right.
you're all
Right.
crazy now
Oh,
because of it. So,
yeah.
it-
Yep.
but that's kind of what I would say is like the beginnings of it all, right? Is
Mm.
know your people, connect with them, do your job well, and just have a good character.
Oh, I like I love learning concepts that have that. And it's funny. I've been just jotting notes down as you're talking, and I have one horrible handwriting, so I got to try to decipher what the hell I was trying to write. But you just hit on it, and we'll try to go on it. The generational gaps is so true.
Mm,
But what I find is really funny um, is that there's always a generational gap in the fire service. There's always a generation that's just going to be the worst generation the fire service has ever experienced and will ever experience. And it always seemed it's always the generation that is between the age group of, we'll say 16 if departments have a in-house, junior program, to, I don't know, I'll be generous and say 30, 32, 35. That's always the generation that is the worst in the fire service. And it's so fun because it still happens to this day. There are individuals across different socials and different realms where I'll challenge them on that. Like, where why are they the worst? And they go off on this whole tangent, and I'll let them foam from both sides of the mouth, and then I quietly remind them at the end, you were that young generation at one point in time too.
Right. Yeah.
And it open generally speaking, it usually opens up that dialogue for, it's like, oh man, you're right. Because I'll be honest, I was that generation. These kids aren't going to do any better, and blah blah blah, and they don't know what this, they don't know what that. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever be able to fix that whole generational gap. I really don't. But I think the best way we might be able to at least stay in step with that, is making sure that people, one, never forget where they started. Humility is very, very huge. I do believe that even sometimes the best of us, there's that proud, that moment where the pride of, I am, a deputy, or I'm the fire chief. That there's a fine line between being proud of it and being, arrogant with it. And it's staying humble, but really truthfully, like I was just doing it the other night on a live on a social platform, and the gentleman went off. He's very, very knowledgeable, and he's not anti, new generation. It's just, so he did it, and I did the same thing. I'm like, what you have to remember, like it or leave it, this is our hiring pool. We have to. This is nobody else is. The next generation behind them are kids. They're in preschool today.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and it's, well, they don't listen, they don't that, and I go, is it they don't listen, or we don't know how to talk to them?
That's it right
So,
there.
it's, oh, well, they're always on their phones. I'm like, okay, again, we don't know how to talk to them. So their language is more technology based.
Right.
Back when I was younger, we didn't have, not every kid was lucky enough to have a cell phone, or hell, the house might not even have a cell phone. You were lucky if you had a landline, let alone cell phones in the house. So now we need to find ways to train and to connect with our firefighters using technology. There's
Right.
plenty of programs out there. Maybe it's a random group text to some of the younger guys. Let's just say, for the sake, you have a big box store in town. There's a fire that gets bagged out right now. You show up on scene. There's fire coming out of the Alpha Bravo side. What are you going to do? And let them do a size up right there on their
Yeah.
phones. Just now you're talking in their language. You're in their arena, because again, we are not the future of the fire service. They are. And it's kind of one of those things. And the generational gap is something that I there's a couple of hills that I'm willing to die on, and it's the argument about the generational gap and the whole career versus volunteer side. Like, I will fight to the ever living death in support of the volunteer fire service. There are times where I've seen some things posted on social media where I'm like, guys, you're really not helping my argument here. But we're all together. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if we're looking at the generational gap through the lens of being a leader,
Mm.
they want to be led differently.
Okay.
They want to be led differently. And we need to adjust to that.
Mm.
When I was young, your boss, your officer, whatever, they told you what to do, you did it. You didn't question, you did what
Mm.
you were told to do. You have a generation of people who are not used to blindly accepting orders. They
Mm.
question, they ask questions. They want to be led in a different way. They will respond in a very different way.
Mhm.
And that when we take that thought and we apply it to volunteer organizations, whether it's fire service, EMS, whatever the case is, you're one bad leader away from closing the doors to an organization that's been open
Ooh,
for 100 years.
I
That's
like
all it
that. Yep.
takes, right? One bad leader to drive people away. So instead of trying to bend a new generation to the way you think as an older officer, older member, um, reverse that a little, right? Flip
Mm-hmm.
that and say maybe I need to learn more about the generation that's coming up if I want to be able to pass this mantle, this torch off to that next generation.
Mm.
Because if I don't make the adjustments that I need to make, there's not going to be another generation to hand it to.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yep.
Right. So we've got to take some of the the things that we used to expect of leaders, right?
Mm.
Yelling, screaming, spit flying red in the face.
Sure. Yep.
I mean, it's almost it's almost like a cartoon,
Mm.
the red-faced fire chief that's yelling, and you've probably seen it. I know I've seen it. And I always continually go back to the question, could that have been handled better? Could that
Mm.
have been handled differently? And what it all kind of ties back to is what we start talking about, in the first module of command leadership development, and that is, that emotional intelligence. And Greg actually, mentioned this when he talked with you. I show them this very simple equation: E plus R equals O.
Mm.
You know, not going to say it's mine. I'm sure you've heard something like this, similar to it somewhere along the way. E plus R equals O. An event plus a response equals an outcome that you can influence,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
right? But conversely, E plus R equals O. An event plus a reaction equals an out of control outcome.
Mm.
So when there's something going on that's creating tension, pressure, stress, we have to identify that, right? We identify, oh, hey, this is happening. I can feel my ears starting to get hot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tactical pause, right? Think about it. Stop and think before you just reply, right?
Mm.
Your reaction, it's immediate. It's not intentional, not really thought through, right? It's just emotion, right?
Mm.
It's driven by emotion.
Mm-hmm.
A response is intentional. It's thought out. It's planned, right? There is reason behind a response, right? That's why fire engines respond and not react, right? We're
Yeah. Yeah.
responding to a scene. We're not reacting to, right? So E plus R equals O. Tactical pause. These are the little frameworks that I put throughout my class for people to remember. And what happens is then you build, right? You have these little frameworks that help you in the moment,
Mm.
as you're driving to the scene, riding the engine to the scene. What's the most important thing right now, right? That's if you're
Mm.
running that through your head, you're doing that every time. It becomes habit, right? So the habit is, okay, now I'm asking myself this question every time. What's the most important thing right now? Don't yell, right? Don't get
Yeah.
amped up.
Yep. Yep.
Calm voice. If I yell over the radio, chances are people aren't going to understand me. I have to remain calm.
Mm.
What is the most important thing I need right now? Right? And then we know, okay, I'm building this habit, right? It's training. It's
Mm.
training just like anything else, right? If I remember one of the guys that trained me, man, he would kill us on hitting the fire hydrant, right?
Mm.
And you would do it over and over and over and over until you got it right. He drilled that into us. Hey, it's the most important thing. It doesn't do you much good to fight a fire if you don't have water, right? So same sort of thing, right? Hey, I'm on my way and I'm thinking what's the
Mm.
most important thing right now? Remain calm, look, because under pressure, under stress,
Mm.
vision starts to narrow, right? Like physically your vision begins to narrow, but mentally that vision starts to narrow as well. So
Yeah,
if we
yeah.
can keep this, locked down under control, set it aside for a minute, we can come back to it, right? We can figure that out later. But for right now, I need to stay calm. I need to
Mm.
look. I need to, keep wide vision, and I need to understand what's the most important thing right now. So as we begin training those things, hey, when something happens that I'm not expecting, E plus R
Yeah.
equals O, right? I know it to, okay, I can identify that this is kind of messing me up a little bit. Tactical pause, take a deep breath. What's the most important thing? So small little frameworks to teach people how to do these things.
Mm.
Add these little frameworks together, and we've got a good model that we can use for command presence,
Mm.
or you might hear it called executive presence, in corporate
Sure,
America,
sure.
so as we build these little frameworks into the course and people practice them,
Mm.
when you do have that big, huge event that you're not expecting, kind of comes out of the middle of nowhere, right? Middle of the day, you've got a small crew because everybody's at work, and this thing
Yeah, yeah.
happened. You fall back to your training,
Mm.
right? If you start to make mistakes and you start to, like you're not kind of, controlling yourself, you revert back to that training, right? That training that's saying, stay calm, right? Take a breath. One breath, one question. E plus R equals O. Let's make sure we get this right. That's the most important thing right now. And then we move. Give
Mm.
yourself those frameworks, practice them,
Yeah.
then reflect. You do an after action report after an incident.
Yeah.
I do a self assessment at the end of the day, or I do a
Yeah,
self
yeah.
assessment at the end of an event, maybe with the team that I lead or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
How did I show up today? Right? Am I being the person that I want to be today? Am I being the leader that I wanted to be today?
Mm.
Could I have handled that differently? How could I have handled it? Why did I
Yeah.
react? Teaching yourself. You've got to be honest with yourself.
Mm.
Unfortunately, sometimes self-reflection is, I say it's like hugging a cactus. You've got to do it. It hurts a little. You don't like it because you see some things, right? You see some things about yourself that you're not necessarily happy with. You might not like so much, but it's an important step. You've got to be honest with yourself when you do that reflection and say, hey, you do the after action reports, after incident reports at the end of your fire.
Mm.
I work in IT. If there's a large scale incident, hey, we're going to break that down. We're going to find out what went on. Jax, hey, we have a
Yeah.
lessons learned meeting after a project. Why not do it with yourself as a leader? It's a proven method. It works.
Yeah. Yep. I like it. It man, and I love the self-reflection is like hugging a cactus. That's good
It
stuff.
is.
I time-stamped it too. So what's cool with this software is sometimes it'll pick up on little, like, they call them hooks or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it'll grab it, sometimes it won't. So I need to make sure that it grabs it, because that was that one in the you're one bad decision away from the doors getting closed, which is huge. And I
Yeah.
think that a lot of leaders forget that. And when we talk at to the aspect of these volunteer fire companies or houses, or how, whatever the common terminology is in somebody's given geographic location, the volunteers it is unfortunately a dying breed, and I hate to
Mm-hmm.
admit to that is the case. But what's happening is we have had some bad leaders, and we still do in a lot of places, that are pushing people away because people value their time at home. They're not
Yeah.
going to work their Monday through Friday job, bust stones at work, and then get their faces kicked in at the firehouse because they didn't put their pants on the right way, or they didn't
Mm-hmm.
park the truck in the right place during a training, or whatever the case is. And I don't blame them. The volunteer fire service is the best business model in the world. I think it's great that people, but it's also it's a victim of its own circumstance,
Mm-hmm.
in the
Yes.
aspect that it allows people. And One of the things that I thought was really neat and that I read is I can't remember if it was either when I was kind of running through what you sent me for command leadership development, or if it was in your intake form that you saw there was a void in the fire
Mhm.
service when you got into the fire service, and you still see that there's a void now.
Yeah.
How I guess, and it may be slightly rhetorical, I guess, but like, why is that even the case? Do you think that there's still, in, you know, decades in between, that there's still a problem in the fire service? Like, where do you think that the problem is kind of stemming from?
Interestingly, I believe it's a problem that we see in business, right? In
Okay.
corporate America, where we promote people, right? We put them in positions of authority without ever teaching them how to be a
Mm,
leader. Same thing here, right? It's the same thing. We don't train people to be leaders
yeah.
until they've been promoted to a position of authority.
Sure. Yep.
We're doing it backward, right? So let's get some leadership development training for the existing leaders that are there.
Mm,
They may learn something new. And for aspiring leaders, like, why shouldn't they learn these things?
yeah. No. Exactly.
Why shouldn't they learn a better way to keep their cool? Because if you lose your head, you lose the room.
Mm,
I know once somebody starts popping off, and I'm kind of, I don't want to
yep.
hear
Here we
that.
go.
And when we look at, as we're talking about volunteers, right? In my lifetime, from 70s through today, Pennsylvania had over 300,000. I think it was closer to 400,000 volunteers.
Wow.
And today's numbers, that's closer to like 37 or 38,000.
Holy
Right.
moly. Yeah. That's a
So
huge difference. Yeah.
yeah, and I believe the numbers. I could be a little off. It's been a little while since I've looked, but I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 85 to 90% of fire service in the country are volunteer.
Mm,
So we have to do a better job, and you know, if we start to improve the way we do things, like
mm,
you had said, I don't want to go to work all day. Then,
yeah.
you know, this volunteer organization that does not pay me, I
Right.
don't want to put up with that, right? So how do we get around that? Well, we give them reasons to come, right? We treat them a little bit better. We
Mm,
teach them a better way, because the guy who used to yell at me and say, "Oh, you're an idiot. Why'd you do it that way?"
yeah.
Right? I could have accepted that and then decided that would be my way of leading,
Mm,
right? And pass that down to the next generation. But I sat back and I observed. I saw, like, hey, there are these guys over here, and people really
mm,
respect them. What are they doing differently than these guys? Well, this guy yells a lot.
yeah.
This guy does everything by himself. Doesn't let anybody do anything.
Right.
Uh, he belittles people on the engine room floor. If that guy's got to talk to somebody, takes them back in the office. We don't even know what happened really until they come out and
Mm.
tell us that it happened.
Yeah.
You've got this guy who never says anything good. There's nothing positive. But that guy, he praises people on the engine room
Mm,
floor. That guy, So I would observe these things. I would pay attention, and yeah, I had these instincts. But once the company that I worked for started putting me into leadership classes and
mm,
courses, and then meeting with a leadership development coach, on a regular basis, which I still do today.
yeah.
Um, somebody recently said, "Oh, it sounds like work therapy." That's a good way to say
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
S-
exactly.
So I meet with leadership development coaches on a regular basis, and you know they've helped me along the way. They've helped me to kind of understand some of the instincts that I had,
Mm,
learn some of the things that I don't know, change the way I do things, ask better questions, right? So some of the
mhm.
things that I've learned through doing this is, hey, let's not assume bad intentions, right? Let's ask questions,
Yes.
verify, right? Before you yell, make sure you know the facts. Make sure you have all of the information before just popping off, because you're going to yell and raise your voice about something you just saw, but there's no context, right? So
Yeah.
you learn better ways of doing things, better ways to communicate with people,
Mm,
and you'll hear it. You'll probably see this in my course there too. Is the biggest problem we have in communication is the illusion that it is taken place.
Yes.
People talk all the time, but what are they absorbing? And so let's teach them how to communicate. Let's teach them a little bit about active listening, right? Let's teach them how to pay attention to people, and let those people know they're being heard, right? Let's teach them how to do that in a way where somebody walks away from whatever that is. It could be just a junior member saying, "Hey, I'm lost." It could be a senior member saying, "I feel disrespected." It could be conflict between two people. All right, well, let's figure those things out, right?
Yeah.
Do I take a side in this argument between two people? Do I step in and say, I got you two step away from each other and stop talking to each other? I don't want this to happen again.
Yeah.
That stops it temporarily, right? But doesn't stop the underlying issue. So let's find out what that underlying issue is, right? We've gotta hear that from people. They're not gonna tell you that they feel, like, oh, I don't like this change you're making because I'm gonna feel stupid. I don't know if I could do it. They're not gonna tell you that.
Yeah.
Let's hear what they're saying, right? And it'll come. It'll come if you ask the right questions, if you listen enough.
No, that's a great angle. So I get ran. It's something that I've fought a lot with when I was younger. Was I've experienced a lot as I've grown older. Is how much I actually have learned from bad bosses, and I'm not sure if it'd be the same in your. I'm almost wondering if I've actually learned more. And I'm this it totally contradicts what you're trying to build, what we're building is good leadership and quality leaders and everything like that. But sometimes I feel you can actually learn more from a poor leader because you remember how you felt when they belittled you in front of people, or at 3 o'clock in the morning when the alarm goes off at the local VFW and you park the truck too close, or whatever the case is, and or it takes too long to determine what head is bad, or whatever the case is. And it's like you immediately realize what the hell you're not going to do if you, and that's that was one of the reasons I went down your reason for joining the leadership, aspect in realm. And mine was just because I knew we deserved better. And it was, again, from being belittled and being told, you're doing it wrong. It's the backdraft scene, right? You're doing it wrong. But it was but it wasn't just like, you're doing it wrong. I'm going to show you how to do it better. It was just, you suck at what you're doing. You are a horrible firefighter. And there was never any, but we're going to make it better. Because I'm okay being told,
Right.
JP, you are sucking wind at what you're doing, but we're going to help you get better. It was very much a, just to put people down and belittle. And that was kind of the, where I started heading down the leadership path. So, I mean, I don't know if maybe, if it was the same for you where maybe do you feel like, sometimes we can learn more from poor leaders, or is this sort of a good mix?
Absolutely. Because now you have somebody to point to and go, I don't want to do it like that.
Yeah.
Right. And like what you're talking about, it goes back to accountability, right? And people really confuse accountability for punishment. They see them the same way, right? They're not the same thing, right? Accountability and punishment are two very different things. And the method that I've adopted over years of being the fire chief, the mayor, I work in tech, and I've got teams, people that report to me. So what I've adopted is simply day one, we talk about accountability and how that will be handled. And it's very simple to me, because if we communicate accountability day one and we talk about accountability, then what we've done is we've set a standard, right? We set that standard, and what it will do for you as a leader is it will make what may have been a difficult conversation a little later on, it'll make it a much easier conversation. So if I were to say, JP, this is the standard. your performance has been under this standard. Can you tell me why? So that's step number one, right? Do you know that you're not meeting the standard? And if you do know, why? Could it possibly be that you found a better way of doing something that you just haven't shared yet? We could learn something, right? We learn something new. We could alter a process, right? We could alter a procedure. What we have to do, though, is we have to understand that there is the standard and it is here. Your performance has been below. I've given you the opportunity to explain why. Okay. Do you understand what the standard is, why the standard exists, and why it is important? Okay, so let's get you there. All right. Do you know how to get there? Do you know how to fix that? If not, I'm going to help you. And if I can't help you, I'm going to find the person that can. And we're going to check in about 3 weeks. Now, none of this means that I'm angry with you, upset with you, think you're a bad firefighter, think you're a bad employee. None of those things. What this is just accountability, right? I don't want the world's okayest team, right? I want
I
an
like it.
elite
Yep.
team, right?
Ooh,
So bringing you
yeah.
to that standard, that's where elite, that's where, that's where awesome happens, when
Mm.
everybody is meeting the standard. It's a very easy discussion to have. So later on, I can say, okay, officers, remember, this is the standard. Lieutenants, your job is to do the engine check, make sure that, everything's functioning and, you're marking it off. Captains, your job is to make sure that that is done, that the paperwork is done, that it has been completed. And if there's follow-ups, that's your responsibility to report them and then possibly manage them. So everybody's still on board here, right? And we get a yes. So later on, if that captain doesn't do what he was supposed to do, that makes what could have been a difficult conversation later on, it makes it much easier because, hey, we talk about the standard all the time. You missed it. Is there a reason why? We were on vacation. Hey, just let me know next time. I'll fill in for you. We'll make sure that those things are taken care of. It eliminates difficult confrontation. It eliminates conflict.
Yeah. You beat me to it because one of the questions, and I'll still ask it anyways, but how do you handle, those instances of hard conversations? I think that's where I think a lot of leaders fail. And that might,
Yeah.
I surmise, I suppose, and it's a completely uneducated, unresearched idea, but one of the beliefs that I have is part of the reason we have a problem with the leadership conundrum and, all of this is because leaders are afraid to have those hard conversations. So we've talked, obviously, you have an amazing, right? Set the expectation ahead of time because if you do it now, if you do have to have that hard conversation, it's less hard on you as the sender of the message because you know for a fact that I know on this date, I set the expectations for the company on, based on this topic or whatever.
That's it.
Did you ever have an instance where you ran into where you had to have that hard conversation when the crew's not prepared, or even if you did, like how for the leaders that are listening, what is sort of your angle of approach when you need to have those really hard, unfortunate conversations with people?
It all begins with setting those expectations, right? Naming the standard, right? Because if we present that standard as leaders, right? Well, job number one is I've got to live up to it myself. Okay? So I can't have that difficult conversation if I'm not living up to the standard myself.
Sure. Yep.
Right. So we set the standard. We agree upon the standard. All right. That's the other thing. Everybody understands that this is the standard, why it's in place, why it's important. Right. So everybody's bought in. This is the standard. We all know it. We talk about it often. So when I do have to have these difficult conversations, first thing is, today is not about me being angry with you. And I'm not saying you're a bad employee or anything like that. This is an accountability discussion today. And we have to have it more conversational than me just kind of wagging my finger.
I like it. Yeah.
Right. So that's why I ask those questions, right? You're not meeting the standard. Can you tell me what's going on? Is there a problem? The guy just couldn't make it in on time, right? So I looked at things and I was like, you want to start a half hour later? And he just kind of looked at me like, that's an option? Yeah, if it makes your life a little easier.
Sure.
And I don't have to get on your ass about being late every day.
Sure, exactly. Yeah.
So, hey, easy compromise there, right? A really good employee who, shows up, a little half hour later, but he stays a half hour later as well. So be flexible, right? But if you're setting expectations, you're setting the standard, you're talking about the standard is easy to enforce. When you have those conversations then later on where somebody's kind of becoming combative, listen, right? Listen at that point. Let's find out why, what's going on. Read between the lines, hear what they're saying.
Yep.
Watch the body language, see what they're doing, right? Because I've often learned that conflict isn't really about the surface. It's about something that's going on beneath the surface, right?
Well put. Yep.
So we've got a guy that can't make it in on time every day. He's probably up playing video games all night, things like that. No, not it. Not it. His mom wasn't feeling well and needed to stop by his mom's house and take the dog out. He was 20 minutes late every day. I mean, I'm not an ogre. Yeah, man, talk to me about that.
Exactly. Right.
We can take care of that. So, when it came to the fire service, I had an officer just wasn't showing up. Just wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. And these are elected positions at that time. So I had to have that conversation with him, to say, hey, we have standards to get into the office, right? You've got to be at X number of trainings, drills, fundraisers, meetings, all these things. You're not living up to that standard as an active officer. The appearance is you did everything you needed to do to get there, and then once you got there, everything fell off. Something going on? And then we have that conversation.
Okay, sure.
So if I start with, I'm not assuming intention, right? I'm not assuming bad intention. I'm not angry. I want to know why. And help me understand why.
Yeah, okay.
And if we start from there, we remove the fear, right? Because, I'm not getting fired. No, you're not getting fired. This is a discussion.
Right.
If it continues, then we say, hey, there's progressive discipline that we're going to have to follow here,
Sure.
Verbal warning, write up, things like that. I try not to bring that up in an accountability discussion. Now when we have our follow-up, if I see you're still doing things, the way you were doing it, right? Hey, that's not how we taught you to, I don't know, hit the hydrant, right? That's not the way we taught you to do that. We want you to do it this way for several reasons, safety and, all these things, right? And we've had that discussion, and 3 weeks later we come back and say, you're still doing it the same way. I don't expect perfection. I do expect progress. And if I'm not seeing that progress, that's where the discussion starts to change. Right? Hey, I've given you 3 weeks. We talked about it. We agreed on the standard. This is what the standard is. You're going to get yourself up to that standard. I don't see the effort. What's happening? Right? So I'm always asking first rather than making an assumption.
Yeah.
I just kind of forgot about it. Okay, that's not good enough now, right? That is not living up to the standards. So I need to see the effort. We're going to check in 2 weeks from now. If I see no effort, we're going to move to, a verbal warning. Right? And here's what that entails. And then next step is written warning. And let's not talk about what's going to happen after that. We don't want to have that discussion. We don't want to put that on the table today. It makes the conversation easier.
Yep. I like that. That's a good move. In fact, I think that so far the best angle I've had is it's similar to setting the expectations, but it's the, before we get into it, I have the conversation of the expectation of how we will leave the current, that conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
it has worked well. It's only had to be done with maybe a couple of times at the most. And it's just, and the same thing. It's, we are going to leave here understanding that, our duty is to the citizens, and that this, and, but I really, I like kind of blending some of your stuff in. I mean, this has been a really, really good conversation.
Yeah, see, I love doing this stuff, but I do like what you're doing there too, right?
Mm,
What you're doing there is you're framing the conversation, right?
yeah.
So you are starting off by saying, here's where we are, and by the time we're done, here's where we're going to be, right?
Yes.
We're going to be one solid unit here, everybody moving in the same direction. So the way you frame that discussion is great.
Mm.
It takes that anxiety out of it for them,
And
right?
that's the thought process, is because, again, I mean, it's so the way that we work it within our firehouse is your typical counseling, the accountability meetings that you have are usually handled at the lieutenant level, because we're broken into companies.
Mhm.
And then, and sometimes even just a simple impromptu counseling session, just to, hey, what's going on, whatever the case is. And if it needs to go to the next level, which is usually your verbal discussion that's documented, blah blah, that's the captain level. And then if it still isn't better, then usually that's when it gets to the deputies level.
Mhm.
And now at this point, we are like a written warning, or maybe another, if we do a little bit more, if it comes out during the discussion that, we don't need to go heavy with the hammer and run down with a the written warning, then we'll do another written verbal. That's just like, hey, we had a discussion. We are reinforcing what the captain said, and we're going to meet in X amount of weeks. We're going to discuss progress, whatever the case is. And then typically, if it gets above us, then usually it's whatever the case is.
Yeah, then it's just whatever happens is happening.
Exactly. That's kind of where, again, being a deputy is really cool, because I get to kind of, we work in that realm of the non-final decision making, capacity. But it's awesome. So your program, command leadership development, is it out and ready for departments to contact you for,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah,
Uh, what we can do, if it works for you, we can throw into the show notes a good way to get a hold of you for departments to reach out. You may get hit from some people that might be a little bit of a drive away, or whatever the case is, but and you may even just get hit from some people that may have questions. So for those that are listening, watching, whatever the case is, what is their best way to get a hold of you if they want to book you to come in and provide your course, or even if they just want to pick your brain on some random things?
yeah. My email address, probably the best way. Um,
Perfect.
we can put that somewhere, right?
Yes, I will throw it across the screen if you
Okay.
want to just shout it out really quick, and then I'll put a subtitle on it.
Okay,
Right when
it's
you do it.
Jr. Dignan Jr. at gmail.com. So
Easy
Jr.
enough.
Dignan and Dignan Dignan. Nobody ever gets that one right. I am
I'm not
Dignan
gonna
and
lie. I was like, is it one or two G's? And I went to go back to that. I used your email to make sure I got the right the right spelling.
yeah, nobody ever gets it right. So I just have fun with people now. I'll be like, no, that's Diggins,
That's
everything
such a
but
good
the way
point.
it's supposed to be said. But yeah,
No,
I've enjoyed this, and
yeah. So Greg got hit with this too. So we have one question that everybody gets asked.
Mhm.
So what is your one pure, raw, and unadulterated piece of advice for somebody who was looking to make that jump into a leadership role in the fire service?
Listen more than you talk.
Okay.
That will be the best piece of advice that I can give you. Listen, learn, observe, talk as little as possible. you're going to learn by just observing other leaders, especially the experienced leaders. And what you're going to start to see as you look. Right? You're going to look at a room, you're going to look at a boardroom, whatever, right? You're going to see a bunch of fireground officers together. Find out who says the least and watch what happens when that person finally talks. You'll see who the leader is. Observe.
I love it.
Right?
Yeah. I love it. Well, Jim, my man, thank you so much for giving us a little over an hour of your time today to record. For our
Appreciate you
listeners,
having me.
yes, of course. For the listeners and the viewers, as always, if something in today's episode hit, don't just sit with it, share it. Be the leader that you were looking for when you first joined the fire service. And if you want more from the Passionate Leader, make sure you're sharing us and following us across all of the social media platforms underneath the Passionate Leader. If you want a more raw and candid conversation on a regular basis every night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on TikTok, we go live. That's where real leadership meets the kitchen table and real talk drives real change. If you want deeper conversations and first access to exclusive offers, join us on Patreon and step into the inner circle. I said it before and I'll say it again because it's very important, especially to myself and Jim. Be the kind of leader that someone else is praying for. Be the leader that you needed when you joined the fire service. And no matter what comes your way, remember this: lead with passion, serve with humility, and leave no room for bottom feeders. Until we meet again, everybody, stay safe.